Good day and welcome to IndustryBroadcast.com's audio article number 44. Today's audio article, titled Game Interface Design, was written by Ethan Kennerly. Mr. Kennerly has developed 5 massively multiplayer online games in the United States and Korea, his titles ranging from producer, game designer, to community relations. Before joining Nexon, the world's second largest MMOG developer, he designed the X-Files trivia game for 20th Century Fox. Since 1997, he has been innovating MMORPGs. He designed and scripted player-driven religions, politics, events, multiplayer quests, arenas, creative contests, fairs, and other features. For a sneak peek into the impressive mind of Mr. Kennerly, check out his blog at www.finegamedesign.com. Audio article number 44, titled Game Interface Design, written by Ethan Kennerly and read aloud by Ryan Wienko on the 12th of December, 2008. Is space deep? Are text games different from graphical games? Is the difference deep? Here are 3 differences that, if not deep, must be broad. Spatial reasoning, construction, and navigation. The textual medium cannot test a player's spatial reasoning skills. Puzzle Pirates, B&B, and Gunbound cannot be done in text. Neither can archery in games that employ skill, such as Asheron's Call. I wonder, could PlanetSide or Endless Ages be played with a text client? It certainly wouldn't be a first-person shooter game. If City of Heroes had made it a priority, it could have, and still could, design spatial reasoning into its gameplay in many ways. Is space deep? Is there a deep difference in spatial reasoning between text and graphics? The difference is older than the mammalian brain. Human brains have evolved to enjoy solving spatial problems, including inverse kinetics, such as, how do I hit that dinner with this spear? According to one of Matt Ridley's sources in The Origins of Virtue, human brains, especially males, contained neural architecture to solve these kind of problems. It might be why boys like first-person shooters, and why physics, among other sciences, were invented. Would Galileo have proven heliocentrism through a textual looking-glass? Of course, it's mathematically probable, and text is where he proposed the simplified cosmology, but would he have been able to be so fascinated as to have tried without vision? Some computer scientists work hard to discover data visualization techniques to perform text to images just so that they may become more entertaining to look at, and so engage the brain's search for patterns. Such pattern searching is a simple form of spatial reasoning. The degree of spatial reasoning is not just a matter of interface, but a matter of genre. Massively multiplayer games compared to non-MMP games seem nascent in regards to design of spatial reasoning challenges. Construction differs. Second Life proves this by example. It is built on players building in 3 dimensions. Its builder mode is a limited 3D modeling suite. In the most abstract sense, text is built on players building in 1 dimension, one character after another. Pedantically, 1 dimension can encode any number of dimensions, but that's not how the eyes see it or the ears hear it. While I've used text interfaces to design graphical games, and of course scripting is inherently more efficient to program as text, such things as level editors are inherently more efficient to review as graphics. Navigation also differs. As an example, City of Heroes has a marker on the compass that locates the next important location, which rotates as the player rotates the avatar. Spider-Man 2 has a marker on the edge of the screen with its interface that performs a similar function. This would have not been possible in text. As another example, text can collapse space. Teleportation does this in graphic games, but it always jars the player, removing her from the fiction for a duration of the teleport. But in text, it's expected to move through the boring areas to reach a decision vertex. This is not to imply that graphics are superior to text, especially when levels are designed poorly. I would rather have text to get me to an interesting part of the game than trudge across a non-interactive landscape. Similar cases can be illustrated for 2 other aspects. Text can exercise conceptual reasoning, for which graphics are too concrete. And of course, only text can exercise reading and writing skills. True graphics do include text, but when all you have is text, then all you can do is read or write. Thus, it is guaranteed these skills are being employed. Levels of play. One could order the systems along an axis. A text game has more representation of space than hypertext does, but a graphical game usually has a more consistent representation of space than a text game does. I'm not sure that a text game sufficiently represents physical space unless any undirected graph suffices. An essential trait of level design is spatial composition. In respect to level design, text games are much closer to hypertext than graphical games are. The rooms are connected, sort of like space, but it's a graph without robust consideration of travel, collision, or volume. In text, many spatial incongruities, architectural eyesores, screen design, and pacing issues due to distance are unimagined. In text, the important areas can be given their due without regard to uninteresting spaces in between. In graphics, it's better to compress or expand the density of interactive objects in order to manage the information on screen at any given time. When I've adapted levels in text games to graphical games with a representation of space, oftentimes the level has to be redesigned from scratch. Hallways need shrinking or expanding. Density of interaction on screen is fixed by the camera, which is constrained by the architecture and terrain. Redesigning has led me to conclude that text does not sufficiently represent space. Still, there should be a place that's organized and easy to navigate. And that space suffices. But is a representation of physical space necessary for a text game? At least for text, the space is not necessarily analogous to physical space. The text game is isomorphic to the undirected graph whose vertices may possess varying degrees of connectivity. These edges may result in inconsistent spatial arrangement. A discrete representation of space as a graph would likely have a consistent arrangement of edges between its vertices, such as in a system of coordinates. So in level design, the representation of space depends on the interface. The level itself is an integral part of an immersive game. When a player must travel through a level to complete an objective, then functionality of the game must be modeled by the paths through the level. In this sense, the degree to which physical space is emulated impacts the shape of the user's possible experiences. Occam's interface. In science, a principle of parsimony is employed, which slashes away complex theories or models in favor of simpler ones. This metaphorical slashing is called Occam's razor. In video games, we can observe a gradual move towards increased complexity in development for less complexity in consumption. Although gaming culture is becoming more sophisticated, there is a difference between game interface complexity and game culture sophistication. A few examples of games supporting this trend are Diablo, Virtua Tennis, Crazy Taxi, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, B&B, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker, Return of the King, Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, and City of Heroes. Each of these games is simplifying the interface of its genre while building on the expert player's literacy of the genre. I believe the interface simplification and literacy will be the telltale sign of gaming's evolution, as it has been with cinema, television, and especially advertising, computers, cell phones, and the internet. As new generations become more and more immersed at earlier and earlier ages, it becomes a part of the culture. Thus the medium evolves, not for complexity, but for literacy. As new generations have come to be familiar with the tropes of movies, the tropes have become more subtle, faster, and simpler. Although production complexity of cinema has increased, consumption complexity has not, and cinematic dialogue has not shot off towards Shakespeare. Game tropes have plenty of simplicity. Blizzard is a house of simplification. StarCraft and Diablo are essentials of their genre. Likewise, Crazy Arcade and Quiz Quiz are massive lobbies of simple games. One is called Ox Quiz, which is as simple as a quiz can be. Imported from a Japanese game show, one either gets the O side or the X side of the board for a true or false question. The losers are eliminated. Since all of this occurs with a few dozen people, it's a bizarre, conformist, but fun for some cultures, social experience. Design-wise, game interfaces are getting simpler. Avatar-centric controls are leading towards camera-centric controls. By camera-centric, I mean if you want the character to go left screen, press the left directional button, even if the character is backwards or upside down in the camera view. Camera controls themselves are leading towards artificial cinematography. This is increasing development complexity for the express purpose of decreasing play complexity, which is decreasing cognitive load. Many games are foregoing explicit controls for automatic behaviors. Both the Wind Waker and Sands of Time semi-automatically select various actual attacks depending on the proximity to the target, and in the Wind Waker, Link auto-jumps when facing an edge. In Virtua Tennis, the player doesn't so much choose a swing as press a button when the ball is near. There is more skill to it, but you don't need it to play. When I have non-gamer guests, I often introduce them to Virtua Tennis. It's very easy to learn, can be played with just the D-pad and the A button, yet it has quite a lot of room for skill development. Escaping realism. Realism is a slippery term. Human experience in the physical world is becoming increasingly supplanted by machine interfaces. Evolutionarily, our brains haven't caught up yet, so to that extent, human experience is rooted in physical metaphors, and of course, by definition, human experience begins and ends in the human body. Realism is not a term I would use to describe an interface. In many cases, I use physical instead of real, because some things as a real community or a real currency are ill-defined, whereas physical community and physical currency are defined. I intentionally avoid phrases like realistic interface or real-world knowledge because our reality as a tool-using species on a planet is rapidly changing. Much of what we take for granted as realistic is simply the incredible non-intuitive pain, suffering, and torturous learning that we mastered before we started keeping track of our lives. Physical manipulation of an object at all is not easy. Program a robot or watch an infant. So what makes it realistic? It is because we don't remember how hard it was to learn how to manipulate. The misunderstanding is deeply rooted. The term for a physically intuitive interaction is termed direct manipulation. But what makes it direct? Granted, the qualities are complex, yet part of the direct manipulation implication is that it mirrors physical interaction. This is not a necessary goal, as some user interface designers are realizing. User interface designers have proposed, instead of physical metaphors for interaction, to have magical metaphors instead. I'm not making it up. There's the lingo magical interaction techniques. In my opinion, the term largely a placeholder term for heretofore unexplored metaphors for interfaces. Yet, as a sci-fi fantasy fan and a casual observer of the Western tradition of magic, I don't mind. As Aleister Crowley, a 20th century proponent of magic, put it, magic is the art of implementing one's will. That is precisely the aim of the user interface to a computer, to efficiently implement the user's will. Indeed, before a child can implement his or her own will through human-computer interaction, he or she has to master human-physical interaction. That, of course, is no small task, and so there may yet be an unexplored alternate for user interface that enables much higher performance than mimicking meat space. Massive interfaces. User interfaces in massively multiplayer games are years behind single-player interfaces. However, within MMPs, World of Warcraft and City of Heroes, out of all have launched in 2004, have led the way in closing the gap. That's not to say WoW or COH are headed in identical directions. It feels like either is trying to appeal to a different level of system experience. City of Heroes interface feels a little more optimized for novice players, while World of Warcraft interface might appeal more to the expert player. Many controls or actions in MMP interfaces are inconsistent with their system usages. There is a difference in opinion among game interface designers. Many PC games with excellent interfaces are not consistent with the interfaces of PC business applications. While all things being equal, inconsistency between applications on a system is better than not. I am not as hard on a novel interface. If it works, it works. For example, Puzzle Pirates uses a radial menu which has not caught on in business applications, or the pie menu, but it fits into the rest of the design, perhaps even better than the radial menu does in Neverwinter Nights. That's because Puzzle Pirate limits the depth and manages the appearance of each button much more elegantly than Neverwinter Nights. Case Study: World of Warcraft. I'll start by mentioning a few things I like about WoW's interface. Usability features. Navigation is user-friendly. A world map, a zone map, and a mini-map work well together with the description of locations given in the quest dialogue to direct a novice player efficiently towards his or her objective. These maps expand with exploration, which lightens the information load on a novice and slightly eases the transition from being a novice to becoming an intermediate player. The mini-map is nice. It's not perfect, but enough to avoid getting lost in the terrain. Well, most of the time. In some areas like Stormwind, there are too many colors for the user to color-code the minimap with terrain, and the "You are here" marker becomes illegible. The minimap just needs a little more legibility, such as a thicker border. The chat customization is robust, which I would imagine satisfies your above sentiment. Maybe a little too robust for a novice player, but an expert player, or enough different players, may collectively need a checkbox for every different category of message. The dual merchant tooltips are a blessing. Mouse over the item and the two tooltips appear, the attributes of the item and the attributes of the item you are already equipped. Blizzard analyzed the task of comparison shopping well. This definitely saves user hours and efficiently directs the user's attention. Some of the Diablo Warcraft features are worth keeping. The NPC quest and training markers are my favorite. These color-coded exclamation and question marks above the NPC heads are elegant and efficient. These markers alone save countless user hours or user years of clicking on NPCs who have nothing important for you at this time. Along the same lines, the particle system that highlights a lootable corpse is also a nice touch. Usability issues. World of Warcraft for the PC has quirks in its interface which don't match Warcraft or Diablo. For example, the default configuration for walk is to depress both mouse buttons. A friend of mine complained of carpal tunnel syndrome after the extended binge of WoW. I can feel why. The font is going to make me go blind. No matter whether I set the resolution high or low, the default font looks like 6 to 8 point print. The interface options permit scaling chat and scaling UI, but even at its maximum scale and highest gamma, I have to squint to read a quest. There seems to be few sites devoted to customizing the WoW interface, but still, can't a novice player with less than a Hawkeye vision be allowed to read without damage to his or her eyes? Conclusion: while it's technically impressive that the WoW interface can be customized, it's much more efficient for satisfying the novice player by presenting a default interface which is usable, and that's what World of Warcraft for the most part is: exceptionally usable. This concludes audio article number 44, once again written by Ethan Kennerly. For more of Ethan's insight and wisdom, we recommend you check out his blog at www.finegamedesign.com, and make sure to check back regularly to industrybroadcast.com, as we do our very best to update the site frequently